Alright, welcome back to episode 17 of my Dodge Raider rebuild project. I thought I'd go ahead and put a video up this week. I'm slogging through on the project here. Since our last video, I spent time installing various interior parts. We got the dash put back in, and the air ducting that goes behind the dash and onto the floorboards. Okay, we're putting this dash back in. There's only 5 bolts holding it in, 3 on the top and 1 on each side. But what you have to do is make sure that all the wires are snaked in the right directions. I have a bunch of things to plug in and some wires to come up through this opening for the center pod, as well as wires coming up to the gauge cluster. And before you screw it down, you just have to reach up there and make sure everything's in the proper spot. Well, the cool thing about going through and detailing everything, it's all spotless under there. I can stick my arm back there and not worry about getting the plague or some kind of weird disease. Okay, we have the 3 top bolts tightened. I reached in and pulled out certain wires that needed to come through the dash for the instruments. I also looked under here to make sure that some of the air ducts were lined up correctly. And so now next we will put on the lower bolts and start plugging in a few things. So I was fixing to put this inclinometer pod into the car after I worked on the instrument panel, the speedometer panel and all that. And I noticed that the little bubble here that I fixed and filled with oil has a small little tiny leak. You can see it right here. And so it sat out here for the last couple 3 weeks, and if you put your finger under it, you can get a little bit of moisture. which is not good. That's the last thing you want to do is put this in the car and have it slowly leak out over time. In fact, over the last, what's it been, a month or so, you can already see a bubble forming at the very top. And I checked the second one that I have. I repaired 2 of them. And it's also slightly leaking. You see that bubble at the top? And if I run my finger on the bottom, I get a little bit of moisture. So I'm going to have to empty both of these and give it one more shot at trying to seal the back and the edges. And if I can't get it to seal, then I'll just drain it and put it in dry. Won't worry about it. It'll bounce around when you're driving, but I'm not going to spend too much time trying to repair these. All right, we're putting in some heating and air conditioning ducting. These are the plastic ducts that go to the floorboards in the back seat. These are the ducts that go under the dash and supply air to some of these vents. So before we put the carpets in, and these go in first. And we're cutting out some metal circles here to glue over the floorboard holes. I decided not to buy the actual item that you're supposed to tap into those holes because they were kind of expensive. So I'm just going to cut out some circles and glue them in. Before we can put the carpets in, I've got to patch in these holes. There's 4 of them. I'm not exactly sure what they're for. Normally you would use holes like this for frame bolts, if you wanted to bolt the body to the frame. I'm not sure why they put these here. It wouldn't be for drainage because this is a flat floorboard, so you could just open the windows to, or open the doors to drain out any water. Anyway, the original metal things that you tap in there were kind of expensive. I think they were like $8 or $9 a piece. I'm just going to glue these on and call it a day. So this is just a windshield weather stripping cement that I'm gooping around these openings to keep them waterproof. And then I took those pieces of metal that I cut out and just undercoated them with black undercoat, so they won't rust up. There. So that'll harden up and that'll be fine. If I ever need, for some reason, if I ever need to take them off, they'll chisel right off. Alright, just finished putting some of the ducting for the heater and air conditioning under the dash. Next I'm working on these toggle switches that go into the dash for the gate lock and the rear defrost. A couple of other things here. I cleaned them up with some soap and water, and then next I'm just going to match them up to the plugs, make sure they're in the right position. Got most of the dash put in with the dash assembly, the instrument panel up on top, and then started working on the carpet kit. Now the carpet kit is always a little bit bigger than is necessary, so you have to do some trimming around the edges, and also you have to trim holes and squares and slits for your shifter, for your center console, for your seats, for all that kind of stuff. So that took some time. Decided to take out the gas pedal because it's running pretty low to the ground, and to get that carpet under is kind of a pain. Just a couple of bolts, comes out. We'll put it back in just a minute. And lastly, I spent some time working on putting the center console in. I had to test some lights, and I'd have to test some wires before I get it completely put all the way in. I've got to test some of the wires for the fog lamps up front. For the backup light, there's a additional backup light that was installed on this truck. I want to make sure it works before I don't have access to the wiring. Well, I'm cleaning up this shifter a little bit. Pulled off the piece of plastic that has the parking, reverse, neutral, drive emblems on there, and it's pretty dirty. There's no way to clean it. It's got a white painted background, and it has kind of a brown mildewy type of a look to it, and I'm stuck with it. So at some point I'll replace that with a new one, or a nicer one. It just looks very dingy. Alright, the slow, tedious process of just putting all the interior parts back in. It's kind of fun because it's all clean. But sometimes it's one step forward, one step back, because you put on something and realize you need to get behind it to put something else on. So we're just kind of picking away at it here. Oh geez, forgot to put this in. Shoot. Okay, this center console, or the column shroud, is nice and tight. Before it wobbled, but now it's nice and tight and on there perfectly, except for I forgot to put the rubber ring around the key lock. So I spent 7 minutes putting this on. I got to take it back off, put that ring on there, and put it back together again. So just what I was talking about, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I got to spend a few minutes to redo it. Okay, we're going to test a few of these lights before I put the center console in. I think I tested them already, but it's been so long I don't remember. You can see there that one works fine. So I had a couple of questions about which manuals I'm using to rebuild this truck with, and I'm primarily using the actual dealer service manuals. Found them on eBay, used, and they come in pairs. You have the body and then the electrical. This deals with everything mechanical, and then anything wiring related is in the smaller manual. And they touch on every aspect of the car, so if you need to fix something, you'll find it in here. However, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to find a particular item that you're looking for. It isn't totally user-friendly. It's designed for the guys that worked at the dealership and they kind of knew their way around these. I also have the old Haynes Mitsubishi repair manual from the early 90s. This is the one I bought when I had my first Montero back in '93. In fact, it still has notes from trying to rebuild a few things back then. This is much more user-friendly. You can find stuff a little easier in it, and it also is a little bit more explanatory on how to fix something. It's designed for not necessarily just the dealer mechanic, but somebody that's just tinkering on their car. However, you can tell it doesn't have quite as much information as the dealer service manuals would. So, you know, if you have one of these pickups, just get on eBay and find a couple of service manuals. Definitely a big plus. So yeah, by the end of this week, we'll have the interior finished. Hopefully the seats will be done, and I'll have to paint the roll bar as soon as we get a couple of days of good weather and put that in. But we're getting close to having this interior wrapped up and put back together. And then the last obstacle will be the engine, getting it started up. So check back and we'll keep you updated.